The room felt colder than before, as if the air itself refused to settle after what had happened. I stood by the window, watching the neon lights flicker outside, their colors bleeding and blending like my thoughts, messy, blurred, impossible to separate. Behind me, I could hear him breathing. Slow. Uncertain, the kind of breathing someone does when they're trying not to break. We hadn't spoken since the moment everything exploded between us, words, truths, accidents, confessions. I wasn't even sure which part started the fire. Maybe all of it. I pressed my forehead against the glass, trying to ground myself, trying to feel something different from the ache sitting heavy in my chest. You should have told me, he finally said, his voice cracked. Just once, just enough to make my heart twist. I closed my eyes. I tried. No, he whispered. You ran. That hit harder than I expected, because he was right. Every time things got too real, too close, too unbearably honest, I pushed away. I thought I was protecting both of us from something we weren't ready to name, but now, in the silence that stretched and thinned like a breaking thread, I wondered if I had been destroying us instead. He stepped closer. I could hear the faint scuff of his shoes against the floor, but he didn't touch me. He didn't dare, not after what we almost lost today. How am I supposed to trust you, he said, if you don't trust me with the truth? I swallowed hard. The words were there, burning like embers behind my teeth, everything I wanted to say, everything I should have said earlier, everything I was terrified of putting into the world. I didn't know how to tell you, I said quietly. I didn't know if it was the right time. He exhaled slowly. There's no perfect time. Just honest moments. Silence again, thicker this time, heavier. When I finally turned around, he was staring at me, but not with anger, worse, with disappointment. His eyes looked tired, as if the weight of the day had aged him in hours. I wanted to believe you, he said. I really did. Before I could step forward, before I could fix the space between us, my phone buzzed sharply on the table. A message. He glanced at it, then back at me. You should check that, he said, voice already pulling away, like a tide retreating before a storm. I grabbed the phone. One look at the screen, and my stomach dropped. Unknown number, we need to talk. Now. Before he finds out everything. My hands went cold. He noticed. What's wrong? He asked cautiously, but there was fear in his voice too, fear I wasn't ready to face. It's nothing, I lied. He took a step back. A soft, broken laugh left his lips. There you go again. I opened my mouth to speak, to explain, to grab him and stop him from walking away, but he was already heading toward the door. Wait, I reached out. He stopped. Didn't turn, just stood there with his hand on the doorknob, shoulders tense, breathing shallow. This is your last chance, he said quietly. Tell me the truth, or I'll stop asking. The door clicked halfway open. I looked at the message again, and felt the world tilt. What if I told him? What if it ruined everything? What if it saved us? I took a step forward, but the screen lit up with another message. Unknown number, he's in danger. And so are you. The door creaked. He whispered, I'm done waiting. And stepped out, leaving me with the glowing screen, and the truth that might destroy us both. If you want, I can continue the next chapter, create visual prompts, or turn this into a script-style continuation. The night the truth began to unravel, nothing felt unusual. The campus courtyard buzzed with the usual chaos, students rushing past with backpacks half-zipped, the smell of roasted corn drifting from a street cart, and the soft hum of distant traffic settling into the evening. If someone had asked me then, I would have sworn everything in my life was perfectly under control, but maybe that was the first lie. I spotted him before he saw me, leaning against the lamppost near the library stairs, scrolling through his phone, completely unaware of the storm he was about to drag me into. The warm yellow light washed over his face, turning the edges soft and impossible to ignore. His hair fell forward in the way I had memorized too many times. Too carefully. Too privately. I inhaled deeply, trying to steady myself. Don't overthink it, just walk up. Act normal, but normal was becoming harder each day, especially around him. When he finally looked up, his eyes locked onto mine with a kind of relief that made my chest tighten. There you are, he said, simple words. But his voice carried something else, something heavier, something he wasn't ready to say aloud. I noticed the slight tremble in his fingers as he put his phone away. The way he shifted his weight, nervously adjusting the strap of his bag. He wasn't usually like this. What's wrong? I asked. He shook his head. Later. Not here. The cool breeze brushed against the back of my neck. A quiet warning my body felt before my mind could understand it. We started walking without discussing where we were going. Our footsteps echoed down the empty hallway of the old academic block, the fluorescent lights flickering above us like failing stars. Each flicker made his shadow stretch and shrink beside mine, never touching, but always close enough to make me wonder if closeness itself was the danger. His silence made the air heavier. Say something, I told myself. Ask him what's bothering him. Ask him why he keeps looking over his shoulder every few seconds. But on the outside, I pretended everything was fine. When we reached the far corner of the hall, he stopped abruptly, his jaw clenched, his eyes darted to the staircase behind us, as if expecting someone to appear. I need to tell you something, he whispered. My heartbeat quickened, then he stepped closer, so close I could feel the warmth radiating from him, smell the faint scent of rain on his hoodie. His breath hovered near my cheek, unsteady, loaded with words he seemed afraid to release. I think someone's watching us, he said. My stomach flipped before I could respond. A soft metallic clang echoed from the stairwell. A door shutting or opening. He grabbed my wrist. We're not safe here. My breath hitched. Safe from who? Safe from what? And why did it feel like whatever was coming was already here? If you want, I can now write the next section, create visual prompts, or continue the storyline with deeper tension. I stood outside Ian's room for a full 5 seconds, frozen in place, trying to decide whether the whisper I heard was real or just something my anxious mind invented out of loneliness or, for worse, desire. Ian. I finally said, my voice barely above a breath. No response, just silence. A silence thick enough that I could feel it pressing against my chest. I backed away from the door, palms sweating, heart pounding hard enough that I could feel it pulsing in my throat. My apartment had never felt so unfamiliar. The shadows seemed longer, the air heavier, corners darker than usual, as if the whole space was holding its breath, waiting for something I wasn't ready for. I ended up pacing the living room, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. My mind kept repeating the look on Ian's face earlier that morning, the small distracted frown, the half answer when I'd asked if he was okay. He'd brushed it off, saying he hadn't slept well, but there had been something else there. Something fragile. Something he wasn't saying. I tried watching a show, reading a message, eating something, anything to resist the urge to check his room again. But I couldn't. The tension kept building, stretching thin, shaking in my bones. Finally, I sucked in a deep breath and approached his door again. This time, I knocked. Hey, you back? Still nothing. A strange cold feeling slid down my spine. What if someone else was inside? What if someone had followed him? Or broken in? I turned the knob slowly, unlocked the door, creaked open with a long, tired groan. His room was dim, lit only by the faint orange glow of the street lamp outside filtering through the blinds. His bed was neatly made. His shoes were lined up in their usual place. Everything was exactly as he'd left it this morning, except for one thing. His closet door was slightly open. A thin sliver of darkness peeked through, like a mouth half open, whispering secrets, and then, just like before, I heard something. A soft thud, like someone shifting their weight. Or maybe, breathing. My pulse spiked. Ian. I whispered again. No answer. I stared at the closet for what felt like forever, each second stretching and warping with tension, until finally I stepped backward, pulled the door shut, and practically fled the room. I didn't know what I was afraid of. An intruder, a misunderstanding, my own imagination, or something far more dangerous, something inside me. I ended up on the balcony, trying to catch my breath. The city outside looked peaceful in a way that felt completely at odds with the storm in my chest. Streetlights flickered. Dogs barked somewhere in the distance. A warm breeze brushed against my face, but instead of calming me, it made me feel even more exposed. That's when my phone buzzed again, another message from Ian, almost home. That was it.No emoji.no punctuation.no explanation. What did he mean almost? The message felt wrong. Cold. Out of rhythm with the Ian I knew, who always sent extra dots, extra words, extra warmth even when he didn't mean to. I typed back, everything okay? No reply. Minutes passed. 10, 15, 20. Still nothing. The uneasiness inside me grew sharper, heavier. I went back inside and sat on the couch, staring at the front door as if it held all the answers I didn't have. Then the key turned in the lock. I stood up automatically, heart jumping to my throat. Ian stepped inside, but the moment he entered, I knew with absolute certainty, something was wrong. His face was pale. His eyes were slightly red, either from exhaustion or something else. His shoulders were tense, his steps slower, heavier. He wasn't wearing his gym clothes anymore. Instead, he had on a plain black hoodie, sleeves pulled over his fists like he wanted to disappear inside himself. "Hey," he said quietly, barely looking at me. "Hey, where were you?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out brittle. He hesitated. "Not long. Just enough to make my stomach twist. Caught up with someone," he said. "Someone." That word echoed in my mind stronger than I wanted it to. "Oh," I replied, forcing a neutral tone. He didn't elaborate. Didn't explain. Didn't offer anything more. Instead, he brushed past me toward the kitchen, giving me only a faint whiff of his cologne, warm, woodsy, and so painfully familiar it made my chest tighten. I watched him open the fridge, grab a water bottle, and stand there gulping down half of it like he'd been wandering a desert. "You good?" I finally asked. For a moment, he froze. His jaw clenched. His grip tightened around the bottle. Then he turned around slowly. "I'm fine," he said, too quickly, too sharply. We stared at each other, the air between us flickering like static. I wanted to ask again. I wanted to push. To demand an answer. To ask why his eyes looked haunted, why his voice trembled, why the room felt too small with him in it. But instead, I swallowed the impulse and said, "Okay." Lies felt safer than truth sometimes. He disappeared into his room without another word. The door clicked shut. I stood in the kitchen, feeling that same cold thread of tension coil around my ribs. Something had happened tonight, something he wasn't saying, something that followed him home like a shadow. After a few minutes, I realized I was still gripping the edge of the counter, knuckles white. I needed air. I walked down the hallway to my room, but as I passed his door, I heard it again, that same soft sound, breathing, but this time, it wasn't coming from inside the room. It was coming from behind the door, right against it, like he was standing there, listening. I froze. "Iron." I whispered. "Silence." I should have kept walking. I should have acted like I heard nothing, but something inside me, some mix of concern and curiosity and something darker, made me linger. And then he spoke very quietly, almost trembling. "Can we talk?" The words hit me like a dart. "Yeah," I said. "Sure." His door opened a few inches, but he didn't step out. He just stared at me through the narrow gap, his eyes oddly vulnerable. "Not here," he said. "Come inside." My heartbeat quickened for reasons I didn't want to examine too closely. I slipped into his room. He closed the door behind us. The room felt smaller, warmer. The blinds were half closed, letting in just enough streetlight to outline his face, sharp jaw, tired eyes, lips pressed tight like he was fighting to keep something inside. He sat on the edge of the bed. I stayed standing, unsure where to exist. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. His hands shook slightly. He rubbed them together, then pressed them between his knees. "I don't know what's happening to me," he finally said. My breath caught. He ran a hand over his face, avoiding my gaze. "I went to meet someone," he continued, voice low. "Someone I trusted." There was a pause. It didn't go how I expected. My stomach sank. "What happened?" I asked carefully. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You wouldn't believe me. Try me." He looked up, then really looked at me, and something flickered in his eyes. Something raw. Something scared. Something intimate. It made me question things, he whispered. The room felt too still. Things about myself. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Things I didn't think I could ever feel. A cold rush surged through me. "Feel like what?" I asked, aware that my voice wasn't steady anymore. He hesitated, then stood up, close, too close, barely a foot between us. "Like this," he murmured. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air grew thick with something unspoken, dangerous, electrifying. His eyes flicked to my lips, so quick I almost believed I imagined it. Almost. My chest tightened painfully. This was wrong, impossible. He was straight. He had always been straight, but then, why was he looking at me like that? Why was he breathing like that? Why was his voice so unsteady? "Am I in?" I whispered. He stepped back abruptly, running a hand through his hair as if trying to erase the moment I shouldn't have said anything. He muttered, "Forget it." "Ian, please," he said sharply, then softer, "not tonight." He moved toward the window, turning his back to me. His shoulders shook slightly, not enough to be obvious, but enough for me to notice. Enough to make my chest ache. He wasn't just confused. He was breaking, and I didn't know whether I was supposed to help or stay away. I stepped back toward the door, my hand resting on the knob, but before I opened it, he spoke again, barely audible. Did you ever feel something you shouldn't? My heartbeat stopped. He didn't turn around. Didn't look at me, but the question hung in the air like a blade, sharp and dangerous. Did I dare answer? Did he already know? I swallowed hard, unable to speak, and maybe that silence was an answer in itself. If you want, I can continue with the climactic moment, 800 to 1,200 words, next, with even more tension, emotion, and shocking unresolved moments. I never thought a quiet Tuesday evening could change the way I looked at everything, my home, my roommate, even myself. But that's how these things happen, I guess. Not with a warning. Just a shift in the air, subtle enough to ignore, heavy enough to haunt you. Our apartment sat on the edge of campus, squeezed between two old buildings with chip paint and balconies that looked like they'd collapse if you breathed too hard. Inside, though, it always felt warm, especially when Liam was around. Liam, my straight roommate. At least, that's what I thought. He had one of those easygoing personalities that made people instantly like him, messy hair that somehow always looked good, broad shoulders, relaxed smile. I used to think I was good at hiding the way my eyes lingered a little too long, the way my chest tightened whenever he'd walk out of the bathroom with steam still clinging to his skin. But that evening, everything felt off. The apartment was too quiet. No music, no soft humming from the kitchen, none of Liam's usual noises that filled the space and made it feel less lonely. The rain tapped against the window like restless fingers, and the faint smell of his cologne still hung in the living room, just enough to make me aware of his absence. Where is he? He never stayed out this late on a weekday. I tried to distract myself, opened my laptop, started typing half-hearted notes for a class I'd already skipped twice. But the feeling didn't go away. The silence felt unnatural, like the air was waiting for something to happen. Around 11, I heard footsteps outside the door. Slow. Uneven. Then a slight pause, like whoever was out there was hesitating. My heartbeat stuttered at the knob turned. When the door finally swung open, Liam stepped inside, drenched from the rain, breathing harder than he should have been. His shirt clung to his body, his hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes, God, his eyes, were wide, almost shaky. I'd never seen him like that. Liam? I asked, standing without knowing why. He didn't answer. He just stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. Something between fear and relief. Something intimate. Something dangerous. Then I noticed it, a faint red mark on his neck. Fresh. Like someone had grabbed him. Or kissed him. Or God knows what. My stomach tightened. Are you okay? What happened? He swallowed, stepped closer, and the door clicked shut behind him. The sound echoed through the quiet apartment like a warning. I need to tell you something, he said, voice low, trembling. But you're not going to believe me. My breath caught, because in that moment, standing there, soaked and staring at me like I was the only person in the world he could go to, I realized something was very, very wrong, and whatever he was about to say, I wasn't sure I was ready for it. What happened to him out there, and why did he look at me like that? If you want, I can continue with the rising action, 1,200 to 1,500 words, next, just say, continue. His question, did you ever feel something you shouldn't? Hung in the air like smoke, thick and impossible to ignore. I could feel it wrapping around us, tightening slowly, forcing truths out of hiding. Ian still had his back to me, hands gripping the windowsill, shoulders tense. The city lights painted soft amber lines across his hoodie, outlining the tension running through him. He wasn't breathing evenly. Neither was I. I swallowed hard. Everything in me screamed to leave the room, to protect myself, to protect him, to pretend none of this was happening. But a different part, deep, reckless, and honest, begged me to stay. So I closed his door quietly, his head lifted slightly, as if he heard the soft click. Ian, I said, stepping toward him. My voice shook more than I wanted it to. He didn't turn around. I don't want to make things worse, I continued. I don't want to assume something you don't mean. He let out a small, bitter laugh. I don't even know what I mean. His voice cracked at the end. I stopped a few feet behind him, torn between comfort and caution. The air between us felt hot, heavy, like the moment right before a storm breaks open. What happened tonight? I whispered. He exhaled shakily. I went to see someone, a girl. Someone I used to talk to. He paused, shoulders rising and falling slowly, unsteadily, but when I was with her, I couldn't focus. I felt wrong. Out of place. Like I was forcing myself into something I didn't want. He turned his head slightly, enough that I could see the edge of his jaw, the trembling line of his mouth. It scared me, he said softly. Because all I could think about was, he stopped himself, jaw tightening. My pulse hammered in my ears. Was what? I asked. His silence said more than words ever could. Finally, he turned fully to face me. His eyes were glassy, conflicted, full of emotions he couldn't name yet. He looked fragile. Almost breakable. And something inside me tightened painfully at the sight. Whenever I'm with you, I feel different, he murmured. My breath caught. I don't understand it. I don't know what it means. He shook his head, eyes never leaving mine, but I can't ignore it anymore. The room felt suddenly much smaller. Tyan, I whispered. He stepped closer, one slow, hesitant step. Tell me, he said quietly, voice barely holding itself together. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you never felt anything. I froze. He wasn't asking for reassurance. He was begging for clarity, for honesty, for something real to hold on to. But telling him the truth meant risking everything, our friendship, our living situation, his sense of identity. My already fragile heart guilt clawed at my chest. I felt selfish for wanting this moment. Selfish for wanting him. Ian, this is dangerous, I said. You're confused. You're stressed. You don't owe me anything. His expression hardened, not with anger, but with hurt. Don't do that, he said. Don't act like nothing's happening. He moved closer again, now just inches away, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. Close enough to see the tiny tremor in his lips. Look at me, he whispered. I did, and that was my mistake, because his eyes, dark, searching, terrified, held a truth he clearly didn't know how to fight anymore. He lifted a hand halfway, as though he wanted to reach for me but was scared to complete the gesture. His fingers hovered in the space between us, trembling slightly. I felt my own body leaning forward before my mind caught up. Instinct. Gravity. Something magnetic, but I stopped myself. He noticed. His voice dropped to a hush. What are you afraid of? Hurting you, I said honestly. Or letting you hurt yourself? The vulnerability on his face deepened. My whole life feels like a lie right now, he whispered. Everything I thought I knew, who I am, what I want, it's slipping. He pressed a hand to his chest. I don't know why I keep thinking about you. But I do. Constantly. My stomach twisted. And tonight, he continued, taking a shaky breath, when I was with her, I realized something I shouldn't have. I waited. He looked up, eyes shining with something raw and dangerous. I wanted it to be you instead. My entire world tilted as the room spun with too much clarity, too much heat, too much feeling I'd spent years trying to bury under careful, controlled silence. Ian, I breathed. He stepped even closer, no more inches between us, just breath and fear and a tension so sharp it felt like a promise. He raised his hand again, slower this time. Deliberate, his fingers brushed the side of my jaw. A touch so light it barely existed, yet it set my entire body on fire. I closed my eyes because it was the only way to keep myself from breaking. I shouldn't be doing this, he whispered. Then don't, I managed, though my voice trembled. But I want to, he said, even softer. The confession hung between us like an exposed wire. I opened my eyes, his gaze searched mine, full of hesitation and desire and guilt all twisted together. He leaned in just an inch, just enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath against my cheek, not touching, not crossing the line, but close enough to erase every ounce of distance we'd kept for weeks. His lips hovered near mine, close enough for my heart to stutter violently, close enough that every unspoken thought between us became painfully loud. Ian, I whispered, if you do this, everything changes. I know, he murmured, and you might not like what you find on the other side. Maybe not. His voice cracked, but I'm tired of pretending. He exhaled shakily, forehead almost touching mine. Tell me to stop, he said. And I will. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My silence trembled between us, just like his breath, just like my hands, just like the invisible line we were both standing on. Seconds stretched, then a door slammed somewhere in the hallway outside our apartment. Iron jerked back slightly, startled. The tension snapped like a rope pulled too tight. We stood there, breathing hard, neither moving, both shaken. The moment had shattered, but the consequences of it still pulsed in the room. His hand fell to his side. He looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. What did we just do? I didn't know the answer. Or maybe I did, and maybe that was the part that scared me most. If you want, I can continue with the falling action, 600 to 800 words, full of emotional aftermath, confusion, guilt, tension, and unresolved feelings. For a few seconds after the slam echoed through the hallway, neither of us spoke. The sound felt like a warning, sharp, sudden, brutally real, slicing straight through the fragile moment we'd been balancing on. Iron's chest rose and fell in uneven, shaky breaths. He ran his fingers through his hair again, but this time the gesture wasn't casual or effortless. It was frantic, desperate. Like he was trying to erase the last 10 minutes from his memory, or push them deeper inside. I shouldn't have, he started, voice cracking mid-sentence. I said nothing. He stepped back, bumping into the edge of his desk. The lamp on it wobbled slightly, the faint light trembling like we were. The soft glow outlined his face, the panic in his eyes, the guilt twisting his mouth, the way his hands kept clenching and unclenching at his sides. I didn't mean, he tried again, but that wasn't true, and we both knew it. You did, I said softly. He flinched for a heartbeat. He looked like a trapped animal, cornered, confused, terrified by his own instincts. I don't even recognize myself right now, he whispered. The room felt too silent, too intimate for the chaos roaring inside us. I wanted to step forward, to calm him, to tell him things didn't have to make sense tonight. But I stayed rooted to the spot. Maybe because I feared touching him would break him. Or break me. He stared at the floor like the answer was hidden in the wooden patterns. I don't know what's happening to me, he said. It's like my head is saying one thing, but my body. He stopped, swallowing hard. His face flushed. Not with embarrassment, but with something else, something dangerous and unspoken. We crossed a line, he said. His voice trembled, but there was truth in it, and I don't even know how we got there. I almost laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. Oh, come on, I said. It didn't start tonight. He looked up sharply. You think I didn't notice? I continued, heart hammering. The way you looked at me sometimes? The way you get quiet out of nowhere? The way you avoided eye contact when you were confused? Color rose in his cheeks. Avoiding eye contact doesn't mean what you think. Maybe not, I said. But the way you just looked at me did. He froze. His jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists. There was a brief, painful moment where his eyes softened, where he seemed ready to confess something. Something big. Something real, but then he blinked it away. I can't talk about this, he muttered, shaking his head. Not tonight. He walked past me, too close, close enough that the warmth of his body brushed mine like a ghost. Close enough that the scent of his cologne wrapped around me for a fleeting, torturous second. Close enough that my chest burned from not reaching out to stop him. He pulled the door open halfway, then stopped. His hand hovered on the edge, knuckles white. Are you mad at me? He asked quietly. The question hit harder than I expected, maybe because of how fragile it sounded, how uncertain. No, I answered. Just confused. And worried. He let out a shaky breath. Me too. He turned his face slightly, just enough that I could see the side of his jaw tighten. I don't know what this means, he whispered. Or what happens next. Neither do I. He hesitated. A long, heavy silence stretched between us again, the kind filled with all the things we didn't say, all the things we were too afraid to admit. Finally, he stepped out into the hallway, but before he could close the door behind him, he said without turning around, I didn't imagine that moment, right? You felt it too. My heart stuttered, but I couldn't give him the answer he wanted. Not tonight, not when he was unraveling in front of me. I don't know, I said, my voice barely a breath. Maybe we both need time. His shoulders sank, from disappointment, relief, I couldn't tell. He nodded once, then closed the door gently. I stood in his room alone, the warmth of his presence fading slowly like the last glow of a dying bulb. The air still felt charged, heavy with everything we'd almost done. On his desk sat the water bottle he'd slammed earlier, tiny droplets still clinging to the rim. On the floor, faint footprints he'd left when pacing. On the bed, the slight dip where he had been sitting before he stepped too close. Everything in the room felt suspended. Waiting for the next mistake, the next confession, the next moment that could destroy everything or change it forever. I finally stepped out and closed his door gently behind me. His room stayed dark, mine felt darker, and somewhere in the apartment silence, beneath the hum of the old ceiling fan and the distant sound of traffic, one question pulsed quietly. Had something begun tonight? Or had we only awakened something that had always been there? If you want, I can continue with the final conclusion. Cliffhanger, 400 to 600 words. Dramatic, unresolved, and emotionally intense.